Hey, read through the word. Today is November 11th, and today's lesson is called Rise, Peter. Here we are as we're continuing through the book of Acts, and I told you that we were going to see a change. Remember, we were looking at the gospel that would go to Judea, to Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And so we looked at Judea and Samaria, and at this point we're going to start watching as we watch the gospel being taken to the ends of the earth. And first thing, at this point, I'm trying to think, we're Acts chapter 10. And so the chapter before is the conversion of Saul. So Saul, who had been the head of the persecution, and everything is, Saul is converted, he becomes a Christian, and then the next thing we see is Peter. These two things really do combine because of what we're going to see happen with the life of Peter, what we see right here with Peter, and then we're going to continue as we look at Saul/Paul and what happens further in the book of Acts and what we're seeing with the gospel being spread to the ends of the earth. And then, at that point, that's where we're included in that. We are to the ends of the earth. That still, thousands of years later, here we are. The gospel still being spread. And so, we're going to look at, right here, we're still looking at the followers of the way. At this point, that's what they're called. Followers of the way, capital W on way, as they spread the gospel. And to the what we're going to see right now is we're going to step into the Gentile world. Can I say this, that as we look at today, this account in the life of Peter, that when Peter got up that morning, he never thought his day would end the way it did. Never. So what we're looking at today is on Acts chapter 10, verses 34 and 35. At the end of the story, towards the end of it, you see, it says this, and then Peter replied, I see very clearly that God shows no favoritism. In every nation, he accepts those who fear him and do what is right. This is the message of good news for the people of Israel, that there is peace with God through Jesus Christ, who is Lord of all. And then he starts talking, and telling the good news that this is what was preached to Israel, and now I bring it to you. So, let's go through this day and see what's going on, because it is so. Remember how we've been looking at the hand of God at work in history, and how God orchestrates things and times them perfectly. This example of the centurion, or Cornelius the centurion, and Peter, is God's perfect timing. And so, because it says that centurion wanted to know more. He was a God-fearer, what they called a God worshiper. And he is which means he is a Gentile, but he follows the God of Israel. He knows he is real, and he's following him. And he hears Peter's there, and he wants to know more. So he sends people to get Peter. And so then you get this, flash over to a different scene. And all of a sudden we find Peter. And it says that Peter has a vision. This is the next day, as Cornelius' messengers were nearing the town, Peter went up to the flat roof to pray. It was about noon, and he was hungry. But while the meal was being prepared, he fell into a trance, and he saw the sky open, and something like a large sheet was set down on its four corners. In the sheet were all sorts of animals, reptiles, and birds, and the voice said to him, Get up, Peter, kill and eat them. No, Lord, Peter says. I've never eaten anything that our Jewish laws have declared impure and unclean. But the voice spoke again. Do not call something unclean if God's made it clean. The same vision repeated 3 times. And then the sheet was suddenly pulled up to heaven. Peter was very perplexed. What would this vision mean? Just then, those guys show up at the door. And they're like, these men have come looking for you. And they said, we were sent by Cornelius, a Roman officer. He's a devout and God-fearing man. And then Peter was like, okay, stay. Looks like I'm going with you. And so what happens is Peter does go. And that's what our verse looks at. Is Peter says, I see now. This was not about the bacon. So this was never about food. What God is showing is that there are no racial walls between the Jews and the Gentiles anymore. They're taken down. There is not that. God speaks to Peter through a vision, and to make sure Peter understood, he did it 3 times. Like, rise, Peter, kill and eat. Rise, Peter, kill and eat. Rise, Peter, kill and eat. This is the vision that comes forth. It was never about the fowl. I always make the joke, it was not about the bacon. Glad we have bacon, but it was not about the bacon. Bacon was unclean. It was a pig, so you couldn't eat it. So the Jewish dietary laws wouldn't allow it. Jews didn't mix with Gentiles. Remember, that's what Jesus always got in trouble for, or is being around people you weren't supposed to stay clean. You couldn't go around unclean people. You could not be seen with a Gentile. That was big no-no. So this was not about the food. This was about all people being equal. All people are worthy of hearing the gospel. We don't hold back the gospel from anyone. And so that's what is going on. This is about the gospel is good news for all people. Now I want you to notice how quickly this happened, because I think there's something for us to learn here. Paul didn't need a theology class in order to understand all of this. Peter didn't need a theology class. He's like, I don't understand this new doctrine. Could you sit down and explain it all to me? He saw from God, had the vision, immediately the men show up, and you know what? Peter believed God. And then Peter was given the opportunity immediately. Do you believe me? Do you obey? He didn't have to understand all of it. And by the end of the day, Peter saw God add to the family in ways he never would have believed. Or by the end of the next day. He spent the night and then he goes the next day. So in the space of one day into the next, what Peter thought totally changed. Because why? Because he believed God. He believed God. He didn't understand how it happened. He just knows God said so. And I know who God is. I trust him. I believe him. I obey him. I think so many of our missteps in our life of faith are that we think we have to understand everything before we obey. And that's not what we get from the text. I had a student today in my Bible class. He's like, Mrs. Nance, I have a question for you. And I always go, uh-oh. I just don't know what the question is going to be. And I said, okay, yes. What is it? And he said, I don't understand. What do you mean God was not created? Now, you know my middle school class is, it's a middle schooler. So this is an 8th grade student. And he said, I don't get how God is like not created. How does, I don't understand that. And I said, can I tell you this? I said, I'm going to explain some things to you. But at the end of it, it's always everything is going to come down by faith. Do you believe, it all is, do you believe that God is who he says he is? Well, yes, ma'am. And I said, okay. So when Moses asked God, what is your name? God says, I am. And I said, we lose some of that because of translation. I said what he's actually saying is, I was, I am, I will be the God who was, who is, and who is to come. He says in that one statement, he says, I am the self-existent eternal God. He tells us he has always been and will always be. He is eternal. I said, you got to choose. Do you believe that he is who he says he is? He's like, yeah, that's, I said, now, we go a step further in that God, I said, God himself is not bound by the space and time he created to place us in. So there again, his ideas, and I said, we exist inside the space and time that God's created. Well, Mrs. Nance, this is really blowing my mind. I said, yes, because we're not God. He is. I said, there are times in our life where we are faced with a choice. Do we believe that God is who he says he is? He can do what he says he can do, or we don't. It's called faith. We have to take that. Do we believe him? Do we believe him? Peter believed. Peter believed. And he acted. Okay, so I know I keep showing. Now, this has a different cover. I talk about this book all the time, what the Bible's all about. And there was this. I was just, I tell you all the time, I prepare for each of these lessons like I'm teaching an hour-long class. So I always have little bits and pieces. Now, I'm doing a retreat this weekend. You should see all the stuff I have prepared. There's no way I can get all that done. That's not what I'm going for. But I tend to over-prepare, as you can tell. So what had Peter done since Pentecost? This is what Dr. Henrietta Meir says in this book. Christ had told Peter that he was to be a witness. Peter helped start the first church, worked miracles, and baptized thousands. His work had been among the Jewish people. We find Peter now in the house of Simon the tanner. God was going to show Peter that the gospel was for Gentiles as well as Jews. The high wall of religious difference between Jew and Gentile must be broken down. At Pentecost, Peter had used the keys of the kingdom. See Matthew chapter 16. Entrusted to him to open the door of the gospel to the Jews. While Paul was in Tarsus, Peter, in the house of Cornelius, put the key into the lock of the door that had barred the Gentiles, and he opened it. And now we're welcomed in. So we're going to keep on going through sharing the gospel to the ends of the earth. We'll see you next time on Read Through the Word.